Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council slaps new restrictions on some Chinese officials looking to visit Taiwan. Former presidential candidate Ko Wen-je is out on bail once again after posting a bond of over $2.1 million. The U.S. commemorates former President Jimmy Carter's enduring legacy after his death at the age of 100. Plus, families mourn the loss of their loved ones after the deadliest plane crash on South Korean soil. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Taiwan's main agency overseeing relations with China says anti-separatist guidelines issued by Beijing are hurting cross-strait exchanges. The Mainland Affairs Council says it will block permits for certain Chinese officials coming to Taiwan unless they are coming to meet with the government. Our reporter Jaime Ocon has this update.
In an interview with the Central News Agency, the head of Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, Ko Wen-je, is protesting some policies from China in which they can label people in Taiwan as separatists without clear reasoning. Now, he says that this extremely damages normal cross-strait exchanges, raising antagonism between people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait and increasing the personal risk of people traveling to the mainland. Cho also goes as far as saying that basically, if you do not support the Chinese Communist Party reunification policy, you may be brought to justice. Now, the Mainland Affairs Council says it will now refuse permits for certain officials from China coming to Taiwan unless they're coming to meet with the government. Now, what Cho is referring to are the so-called 22 guidelines that China released back in June, in which Beijing can charge anyone they suspect as supporting Taiwanese independence. The most severe consequence could be the death penalty. China considers Taiwan as its own territory, and many observers say this is another way to put pressure on Taiwan. There's currently a website where you can see a list of names of people that have already been labeled as separatists. The most prominent person on that list is current Vice President Kim Xiao. These comments come just a few weeks after the Twin Cities Forum, which was held here in Taiwan, where representatives from both Shanghai and Taipei gathered for talks. Now, most notably, the head of the Shanghai Taiwan's Affairs Office was not admitted to enter, and that decision caused a bit of a stir here in Taiwan, with both major political parties speaking out.
上海台办主任金梅申请来台湾的目的，其实就是要参加双城论坛。陆委会用抗议大陆惩毒22条，并且要求跟金梅会晤。陆委会是用大炮打小鸟，很显然就是无计可施、自嗨式的报复行为。
没有道理，他欺负、滥捕我们的台湾人民，我们还让这些背后的主使的一把手可以自由的进出台湾，这对台湾来讲，不仅是不对等、不尊严，更是伤害台湾人民自由旅行的安全。
This past year has been a bit of a roller coaster for relations between China and Taiwan, and so now all eyes are going to be on the New Year's speeches that both sides give. There's also the wild card with Donald Trump returning to the presidency and what his leadership could mean for engagement and ties between China and Taiwan. Liang Lian, Fu Hong, and Jaime Ocon in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Former presidential candidate Ko Wen-je has avoided returning to custody in his corruption case, successfully posting an additional $1.2 million in bail. The High Court hiked the bail sum after determining that Ko and other defendants risked colluding or fleeing. Joyce Tseng has the latest.
Former Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je walks out on bail again, his supporters crowding around him as he left the Taipei District Prosecutor's office with his wife Chen Pei-chi by his side. Earlier, Chen paid the additional $1.2 million bail mandated by the High Court to secure her husband's freedom for a while longer. Just days ago, the one-time presidential hopeful was released from close to 4 months in custody, indicted for corruption and embezzling political funds from when he was mayor of Taiwan's capital. He was first granted bail at around $900,000, the High Court revising this to $2.1 million after prosecutors argued Ko may flee or collude with accomplices or witnesses. Members of Ko's Taiwan People's Party, or TPP, who believe their leader is being politically targeted by the ruling party, scrambled to front some of the additional money for Ko.
先渡过难关，等他有钱再还给我们。
我们8个立委，我们8个委员，大家同仇敌忾，就是各自去建设。
The doctor-turned-politician will now be required to wear a tracker during his release and report daily to local authorities by phone. Amid the scandal, Ko has offered to resign as TPP leader, despite founding this third political force that has challenged the country's long-standing two-party system. Back in January, Ko won over a quarter of the presidential vote. Though ultimately losing top office, his party won the role of kingmaker in a legislature with no majority party. Things have changed dramatically since then. Ko is facing a potential sentence of 28 and a half years behind bars, but his party has remained by his side, defending his innocence until proven guilty. Andy Xue and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Families in South Korea are mourning their loved ones after the deadliest plane crash on the country's soil leaves the nation reeling. Wesley Lewis reports.
Heavy with grief, 71-year-old Jun Jae-young is mourning the loss of his daughter. Among the 179 confirmed dead on board Jeju Air Flight 2216 that crashed in South Korea's Muan International Airport in the country's southwest.
40대 중반밖에 안 된 딸이 이렇게 됐으니까 나도 기가 막히고 그러니까.
The Boeing 737 jet had traveled from the Thai capital Bangkok. Footage shows the aircraft veering down the runway and crashing into a wall before exploding upon collision. Officials have been investigating the cause of the crash, including landing gear malfunctions and possible bird strikes. The airport is on the path of migratory birds and has the highest rate of bird strikes in the country.
54분에 착륙 허가를 받고 1차 시도를 하다가 57분에 그 조류 이동 조언을 받고서 문제가 생겨서 이제 다시 재상승 복행을 했었습니다.
The runway here is also known to be almost a kilometer shorter than most international airports, and ongoing construction to lengthen it has been pointed out a potential obstruction during emergencies. But the Transport Ministry has downplayed this. Out of the 175 passengers and 6 crew on board, only 2 survivors, both crew members, were rescued from the tail of the plane. Jeju Airline executives and government officials have come out to offer condolences to the victims' families.
불의의 사고로 희생되신 분들의 명복을 빌며 유가족분들께 깊은 애도와 위로의 말씀을 드립니다. 국민의 안전과 생명을 책임지는 정부 수반의 대행으로서 이루 말할 수 없는 비통함과 송구한 마음입니다.
This crash is the deadliest ever on South Korean soil and comes at a time of deep political turmoil, just weeks after President Yoon Suk-yeol's brief imposition of martial law and his subsequent impeachment. There's a leadership vacuum at the airport too, with its management group lacking a CEO since April, some saying this has contributed to procedural lapses. For those here now, who had been eager to welcome their loved ones, the authorities have handed out DNA test kits to help in identifying remains. Now, the wait they face is agonizing, hoping for answers in the midst of mourning. Hank Xu and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says his country will adopt its toughest U.S. strategy yet ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. The country's state media reported that Kim made the announcement at an annual year-end policy meeting for the ruling party. It did not elaborate on the proposed strategy. Kim reportedly told party members that the U.S., South Korea, and Japan have created a, quote, nuclear military bloc. It comes ahead of Trump's inauguration next month. Trump met with Kim 3 times during his first presidency, and many people are now speculating whether such high-level meetings will resume during the president-elect's second term. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has blamed Russia for the fatal crash of an Azerbaijan Airlines passenger jet last week. Speaking to the country's state media, Aliyev called on Moscow to take accountability and to apologize.
Rusya tərəfi Azərbaycandan üzr istəməlidir. İkinci, öz günahını etiraf etməlidir. Üçüncü, günahkarları cəzalandırmalıdır.
Aliyev also accused Moscow of initially trying to cover up the cause of the crash. Azerbaijani officials have suggested that the aircraft was hit by a Russian air defense system while it was traveling to Grozny in southern Russia, and that area has been targeted by Ukrainian drone strikes in recent weeks. Russian President Vladimir Putin reportedly apologized to Aliyev in a phone call, but he did not accept blame for the incident, and both countries have called for further investigations. Coming up after the break, tackling one of Taiwan's most problematic pests, a popular training course is teaching people how to catch invasive reptiles.
At Connected, we believe in the power of dialogue. It's not just about the headlines, it's about finding common ground. Join the conversation.
Connected with Divya Gopalan on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. America's longest-lived president has died at the age of 100. Harrell Hughes looks back at the life and legacy of Jimmy Carter.
The U.S. flag at half-mast at the nation's capital to commemorate the death of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter at age 100.
This is a sad day, but it brings back an incredible amount of good memories. Today, America and the world, in my view, lost a remarkable leader. He was a statesman and humanitarian. And Jill and I lost a dear friend.
Jimmy who? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy who?
I don't know who he is.
I heard he was a peanut farmer.
Jimmy Carter was virtually unknown when he campaigned for president in 1976. A former naval submarine officer who left to take over the family peanut farm in Georgia. He ran as a Democratic Party candidate on a platform of sincerity and healing after Watergate and the U.S. losses during the Vietnam War, becoming the 39th President of the United States.
Our commitment to human rights must be absolute. Our laws, fair, our natural beauty, preserved. The powerful must not persecute the weak, and human dignity must be enhanced.
Only in office for one term, Carter is known for several landmark events during that time. Among them, severing ties with the Republic of China, known as Taiwan, in 1979, and formally recognizing the People's Republic of China, setting the stage for relations felt to this day.
So by the time we come to 1979, there was a broad view among U.S. political circles that there had to be a more normal relationship with the PRC, in part because they were working together in response to the Soviet threat, right? What both Beijing and Washington saw as the Soviet threat.
Though the official relationship was broken, Carter signed the Taiwan Relations Act into law soon after, providing the framework for unofficial U.S.-Taiwan ties that endures 45 years later. In March of 1979, Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty, sealing the Camp David Accords brokered by Carter the year before, and normalizing relations with Israel, an agreement denounced across the Arab world. But his most difficult days in office were yet to come. In November, Iranian militants took 52 Americans hostage in Tehran, and months later, 8 U.S. servicemen died trying to rescue them. Combined with skyrocketing inflation and an energy crisis back home, re-election became impossible. In 1980, Republican challenger Ronald Reagan asked voters a simple question.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Carter lost 46 out of 50 states, leaving office deeply unpopular. But it was his post-White House years that built his lasting legacy. Crediting his lifelong Christian faith, Carter dedicated the rest of his years to humanitarian work. He and his wife Rosalind established a Carter Center to promote peace, democracy, and human rights. They built over 4,000 homes for impoverished people with Habitat for Humanity and campaigned across the world for democracy and justice. 22 years after leaving office, Jimmy Carter was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, cementing his legacy as a humanitarian and democracy advocate.
Really, the thing that I think most about in terms of Jimmy Carter is the legacy after his presidency and the enormous good and philanthropic work he did in the world, both he and his wife, Rosalind.
He was always remembered as a great humanitarian, starting Habitat for Humanity and really uplifting the people. So today's a very sad day.
He did wonderful things with his life. It's a really sad thing. It's a loss.
It is a loss. Yeah. It is a loss. Sad news.
Yeah.
Sad news.
At age 91, Carter revealed a cancer diagnosis that had spread to his brain, continuing his volunteer work until entering hospice care for the last 2 years of his life. He made a rare public appearance in 2023 when his wife Rosalind, by his side for 77 years and in his words, his equal partner in everything, passed away. Leaving behind 3 generations of descendants, the longest living U.S. president died at his home in Georgia, a global humanitarian at rest in the bosom of the nation he loved. Klein Wang and Harrell Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
For more on Carter's legacy, Alec McDonald spoke to Vincent Chow, the former director of the political division of Taiwan's representative office in the U.S.
Vincent Chow, can you speak a little bit to the legacy which former U.S. President Jimmy Carter left behind, especially here in Taiwan?
I think views towards former President Carter have really evolved over time, particularly after his groundbreaking 1999 visit to Taiwan. And I do think that his legacy as a result has become a lot more nuanced and mixed since the break in relations in 1979. Certainly, President Carter, I think, as we look back on it now, had engaged in a relationship change that was, I think, a continuation of the events that were set in motion by President Nixon in the early 70s. And as we look back, I don't think anybody holds him singularly responsible for that change in relations that we later saw. But we do see that President Carter, during his term until 1980, had also engaged in a balanced approach to Taiwan, despite the severance of diplomatic relations with the ROC, meaning that he saw the passage of the Taiwan Relations Act. He continued this policy of arms sales towards Taiwan, and he continued to emphasize both throughout his term, but also following as well, the importance of peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait. And so I think here in Taiwan, we do see differences in how former President Carter is viewed today vis-a-vis 50 years ago.
Can you talk a little bit about the Taiwan Relations Act and how that continued to support Taiwan and its defense in the 1980s and beyond?
Of course, the Taiwan Relations Act was really a seminal piece of legislation back when it was discussed in the late 70s. And certainly there were a number of people in Congress that were very, very strong and consistent supporters of Taiwan that wanted to see some sort of security assistance and support for Taiwan continue despite the severance of relations. And I mean, this was a legislative effort, but we have seen the executive branch faithfully carry these actions out in the decades since. And so this seminal piece of legislation, I think, is something that is very rare that we've seen over time, which is that it has continued to maintain strong bipartisan support. I think people agree, and the consensus is that the TRA has been absolutely vital to the continuation of peace and stability here.
You mentioned earlier Carter's 1999 visit to Taiwan, where he met with Taiwan's President Lee Teng-hui. That visit, however, was not without controversy at the time. Can you speak a little bit to the legacy of that 1999 visit?
So in 1999, former President Carter come at the invitation of former President Lee Teng-hui, and it was a very interesting visit, to say the least. Don't think both sides had envisioned that this sort of visit would take place. Certainly, I think former President Carter had said at one point that he didn't expect that he would be visiting Taiwan of all places one day, but nevertheless, here he was. And I do think that the visit was not without controversy. Certainly, we had seen Annette Lu, who later became the former vice president between 2000 and 2008, had some choice words for former President Carter during his visit, accusing him of betraying Taiwan's democracy and setting it back. And I do think that, what we saw in the late 90s, I think feelings were still a bit raw, but I do think that as time has gone by, those feelings have mellowed somewhat, and that there has been now further attention paid towards the strong partnership between Taiwan and the United States, and all the efforts, whether we're talking about security, economic, trade, P2P, people-to-people, cultural education, and so forth, that have matured over time.
That was Vincent Zhao, a former diplomat at Taiwan's U.S. office. A county in southern Taiwan has organized a class to teach people how to catch green iguanas, an invasive species that causes serious problems in the region. Spots filled up in 5 minutes. Kata's Kuranta reports.
Catching Green Iguanas 101. A training course in southern Taiwan is packed with people eager to learn how to get rid of this invasive species that eats fields of crops, kills other animals, and wrecks farmers' livelihoods.
自己住那个乡村啊，那个种的蔬菜都是渔猎系在帮忙吃。
150 spots in the class, organized by the Pingdong County government, filled up in just 5 minutes. At the end, they sign a contract promising they will follow local guidelines and not abuse the reptiles or upload photos of them.
我们自己的渔温啊，就都有这种侵害啊，觉得现在有这个机会，就是一起为我们的这个地方付出一点点心力。
Not native to Taiwan, around 100,000 green iguanas were imported here as pets in the early 2000s. And as their owners started to abandon them when they became difficult to care for, the iguanas entered the wild. Over the years, their population has exploded, creating serious problems. Apart from eating crops, experts are also worried about the parasites they carry. This year, Pingdong County alone has caught over 40,000 green iguanas, and there are many more. With no natural predators, they're hard to eliminate and can easily reproduce, laying up to 70 eggs at a time. Local officials say getting rid of them will be a long-term process, and they hope to equip regular people to help.
我们还会再开2场这样子，那2月份我们也会看情形再来规划。
Taiwan has also taken other measures to stop their spread, including banning import and breeding of the species. And now, residents in this county will also be properly trained to join the fight against green iguanas. Joseph Wu and Kata's Kuranta for TaiwanPlus.
UNESCO has added an ancient style of Bosnian folk music to its list of intangible cultural heritage. And as Jonathan Kaplan reports, the passionate musicians who sing these sad love ballads are carrying on a tradition that dates back to the 16th century.
Damir Imamovic is a bard in the classical sense of the word. As with his father and grandfather before him, he performs music known as sevdalinka. Their love songs, often sad ones, and their forlorn melodies form a part of Bosnian and Balkan culture that echo through the centuries back to the Ottoman Empire.
Razlog zašto sam se počeo baviti obrazovanjem u Sevdahu i istraživanjem je baš bio taj što sam shvatio koliko malo javnost zna o žanru sevdalinke i htio sam na neki način ljudima približiti šta je to priča iza te muzike.
Sevdalinka, or sevda, sometimes called the Balkan Blues, is a blend of South Slavic oral poetry and music from the Ottoman Empire. The Turkish imperial realm included what is now Bosnia and Herzegovina. Sevdalinka's slow, heartachy melodies have been sung throughout the region since the 16th century. Now, with the help of other musicians and researchers and the United Nations, the genre is set to be preserved for many generations to come. In 2024, UNESCO recognized sevdalinka as part of the world's intangible cultural heritage.
Danas sam etnomuzikolog, kustos u Odjeljenju za etnologiju Zemaljskog muzeja Bosne i Hercegovine i interpretator sevdalinki. Bilo da pjevam, bilo da sviram, bilo da čitam o sevdalinkama ili razgovaram o njima, ili čak kad ulicom idem, razmišljam o njima i u sebi ih pjevušim. Tako da sevdalinka u mom životu predstavlja ono što ona kao forma zapravo jeste, a to je život.
It is the passion of musicians like Imamovic and Berbic which has helped bring Sevda to a new generation of Bosnians. And now with its inclusion on UNESCO's World Heritage List, they hope Sevdalinka can find new audiences beyond the Balkan states.
Sevdalinka kao takva, kao pjesma koja živi i koja je živjela i koja će živjeti, je zaista jedan od čvrstih temelja bosansko-hercegovačkog društva i naroda. I ja ovim putem pozivam i mlade da je njeguju, da je čuvaju i da je prezentuju po cijelom svijetu.
Aman šeher Banja Luka.
The country of Bosnia and Herzegovina has made great strides since it was ravaged by war in the mid-1990s. Now, in peacetime, as curious travelers meander down the storied streets of its capital Sarajevo, they can hear Bosnians singing the songs of their ancestors and know that these ancient urban melodies will not fade away anytime soon. Kama Xu and Jonathan Kaplan for TaiwanPlus.
And thanks for joining us for TaiwanPlus News. We leave you with scenes of people already testing the confetti ahead of New Year's Eve celebrations in the Big Apple. I'm Eric Gao. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your evening.